We've talked about various dimensions of virtual teams in terms of what they are, why they're important, the benefits of it, and often the difficulties of it. We've talked about a virtual teaming process where we go through planning, we go through forming, we make sure that they're performing and they're producing the results that we want, the 4 stages. And we've talked about various tools to help us get through those stages. In this last section, I want to talk about 2 key elements that managers should be considering in virtual teams. One is diversity and inclusion, and the other is some of the most recent research on what makes effective teams. But I want to start with talking about diversity and inclusion. And I'm sure many of you are rolling your eyes at this point in time, and many of your companies have put you through diversity training and inclusiveness and all that other kind of stuff. But this is diversity in action when you think of virtual teams. Whether it's the single mom working from home, whether it's the millennial working from the ski slopes or whatever it may be, someone working in another country, of another culture with a different language in a different time zone. That's the notion of diversity. Diversity basically is the recognition that there are differences out there in the environment. And diversity strategy is how can we recognize those differences and embrace them and make them part of who we are and how we get things done. And I can't think of any other environment in which diversity and inclusion are more important than making these virtual teams effective. Making people feel that they're a part of a team and making people feel that the communications are all about them and include them in what we're getting done. Decision making is joint decision making, that everyone's voice is heard. So diversity is about recognizing differences and recognizing strengths and recognizing different values and different ways of doing things. Inclusion, which is really what I want to focus on, is about how do we bring those differences together? How do we respect the differences that individuals have, but at the same time pull those individuals to become part of the whole, part of the team? So inclusion is really about embracing the differences, enabling people, almost celebrating those differences, incorporating those unique skill sets and points of view into the teamwork, while also working hard to help that individual become part of a true team. And it's achieving that balance that I think leaders are challenged with oftentimes with virtual teams. Research study after research study talks about its cultural differences in time frame and geographic differences that often scuttle and hurt virtual teams from achieving the success they could. So this isn't a lecture on diversity and inclusion. What this is that our leaders consciously thinking about inclusiveness. Our leaders consciously thinking about every team member feeling a part of that team. And there are certain things that leaders can do. But an understanding of inclusion can be helped by a simple framework. And the simple framework is this. There's a notion of belongingness. Do I feel like I belong to this team? Does the team enable me to feel like I belong to the team? So inclusion is a balance of belongingness, am I part of this team, and this whole notion of differentiation. This whole notion that I am unique. So we've got belongingness and we've got uniqueness. And we don't want to sacrifice the uniqueness to make everyone to assimilate into the Borg, so to speak, to make everyone one of a single mind and create groupthink. We want to celebrate the uniqueness that each individual brings, but we want to figure out how do we get them to belong to the efforts we're trying to get to. And in a simple 2x2 grid, you can figure out, are we a high belonging, low uniqueness? Are we high uniqueness, high belonging, so on and so forth. And you can use the terms we've got labeled here to help you think about, where do I stand in this, on these grids? And is it the right place? Is it a place that I need to be as a group? We may want high belongingness and low uniqueness because we really need to get concerted groupthink effort around what we're trying to get to. Or do we want to celebrate uniqueness? If we don't really have a team and we have more of a work group, then uniqueness is certainly celebrated, and we want them to bring that unique expertise and really emphasize that. So there's no real right or wrong quadrant. Well, there probably is. We do want some degree of belongingness, and we certainly do want some degree of respect for uniqueness. But it really is choices. What's best for this virtual team that we have? And what are the activities that I as a manager can do, and what can I do to encourage my team to create a inclusive culture on this virtual team? Am I creating an environment where people feel safe? Am I creating an environment where people feel that their voice is heard, that they're respected when they come, that they feel safe when they're in this environment? And a lot of that is embedded in the tools we use, the GRIPPY model, in the team charter, in the communications tools that we have, in the protocols we put in place, the way we manage the meetings, the way we intermittently have one-on-one sessions with every member of the team to get their feedback and not just a small few, a small cadre who inform and influence my opinions. So leaders need to take it as a serious part of what they do in running these virtual teams, that I've got to reach out. There's a lot of diversity on these teams. Do I recognize that? And am I working to build an inclusive culture that celebrates the uniqueness of each individual, the values they can contribute and bring to the table, while also building a strong, strong team? And it's critical. And the second point of this last section that I want to make is that there's been a lot of research as to what makes a great team as opposed to a good team. And research by companies such as Google, by a lot of different universities, have come down to some very simple facts. Great teams have a high degree of psychological safety for the members. What that means is, yeah, it could be about physical safety, but it's more psychological safety. The feeling that when I speak up in a meeting, people are going to listen to me. I won't be passed over. That if I haven't contributed a lot, that someone will reach out to me and respect my voice and belongingness, bring me into the team. The fact that I'm not going to be left out of decision-making processes. The fact that I feel that I'm an integral part of the way things get done. The notion that it's a psychologically safe environment where I can speak my mind, I can share my thoughts without fear of repercussion, or that something's going to come back and haunt me with dire consequences. So psychological safety in your teams, and are your team members and as you as a leader, promoting that. Which leads to the second major finding, which I think is very important, is that great teams enable each member to share in equal measure. Each member contributes the same amount in each meeting. Now, sometimes that's unattainable. Sometimes in virtual teams, there are cultural differences that in a synchronous environment where you might be using teleconferencing, where some people just feel uncomfortable putting it out there to a global audience. So there are some cultural things that need to be respected in this regard. But offline, in an asynchronous mode, so to speak, are we reaching out to all the team members? They may not be extroverts. They may not be people who really want to put it out there in a global virtual team basis. But their voices need to be heard and need to be included. So the findings really go to the heart of we listen to people and we speak in equal measure. No one person dominates every meeting. All the voices are heard. There's group decision making. And what really amazed me is that it's the teams that have good communications protocols, good communications practices, and have psychological safety. They might not have all the greatest talent in the world, but because they're a solid team and each member is contributing to the fullest, they become the great teams. So, in the final exercise in your template, I'd like you to consider these notions of inclusiveness and what are we doing as leaders to promote inclusiveness on our virtual teams, and as well to think about what kind of environment are we promoting on our teams in terms of the actual hardcore protocols of how people talk with one another. Do they face one another? Do they share information? Is it a transparent environment? And are all voices respected? Creating that air of psychological safety. So please go to the workbooks for one final exercise and apply some of these concepts to the virtual teams that you're engaged with.